morning in the morning. I'm Mia, this is Dobby, this is my coffee, and let's get started on making bagels from scratch. We're gonna start with activating the yeast. For that we're gonna start with 1 cup of lukewarm water. Make sure it's not too hot. I burned yeast before, it's no fun. Like baby bottle hot. Yeast also needs sugar to be activated, so I'm also adding in 4.5 teaspoons of just plain white granulated sugar. And into that you're gonna add 7 grams of dry yeast. I like to use dry yeast for these bagels, mostly because this is the recipes I started on. And then that's it for 5 or 10 minutes-ish until everything bubbles up and foams a little bit. The beautiful things about bagels is that it's only 5 ingredients. So after your yeast is activated, you're gonna start off with your flour. Listen, the choice of flour you make will determine life or death here. I'm using bread flour. For my fellow Germans, that's Weizen 812. You can also use different flours, all-purpose flour, whatever. As long as it's high in gluten, it should be fine, but I really recommend using bread flour. And in a large bowl, you're gonna put 3.5 cups of bread flour, the yeast mixture, a little bit of salt, 1.5 teaspoons to be exact. And here's the thing about dough, it really depends on where you live, the humidity, the hardness of the water, whatever. Like there's so many factors. So what I like to do is like start my dough with my yeast mixture water, and then I check on the dough and add water as needed. I mostly end up adding 1/2 cup more of warm water. Just make sure it's warm water. Because this flour is so high in gluten, it takes some time to take on the water. I have no idea. I'm not a chemist. I think I just know it takes time to be doughy. It's really much like you have to work with the dough and check on the dough regularly to see if it's like moisturized enough. This is the consistency my dough has, and I feel like it's a perfect bagel consistency. It really doesn't matter if you have a stand mixer or not. You can knead it by hand just perfectly fine. I just don't recommend using the little dough hooks on a hand mixer. I feel like it doesn't really work as well. I don't know, you can try it out and tell me different, but I feel like if you knead by hand or with a big dough hook in a stand mixer, it always makes the best dough. Be patient with the dough. You're gonna regret not kneading it enough. You're gonna regret not paying enough attention. You're gonna regret being impatient after 5 minutes, because every time I try making dough by hand, I mess it up and get impatient and end up doing it with my KitchenAid anyways. I let it mix in my KitchenAid for like 10 minutes. Every few minutes I check on the dough, and when it looks like this, when it's not sticking on the bowl anymore, when it's slowly forming one dough, I take it out. Whenever it comes out of KitchenAid, I feel like it's 90% done. So I take it out on a clean surface without flour. Did that before, doesn't work out well. Without flour, and I stretch and fold it a little bit until it forms a proper dough, and I can tell the dough has enough tension and is this beautiful little dough ball. As soon as I'm happy with the way my dough looks, I take a medium-sized glass bowl, because I think it's very satisfying to see it rise in the glass, and cover that with olive oil. And I also like to brush it into the bowl so it's very evenly spread out, so it's everywhere and not only blobs. I don't know if that's unnecessary, but I like to do that. Hey, Dobby's asking if you could like the video and subscribe so she could get a big Chewy for her awesome performance and to help her mom and this channel. Thank you. And before I put my bowl in there, I take a little bit of the dough and I take a little espresso cup, push it in there, mark it, and then mark another spot when it's doubled in size. Because I feel like if you have the dough ball, you can't really tell that it doubled in size. And it's very important to not under or overproof your dough, so I like to do that just to check myself. And then I put my ball into the greased bowl, cover it with a kitchen cloth, and I put it on my heater. Just put it in a warm spot. I like to put it on my heater, it just works best, because our apartment is in the basement and it tends to be very cold, so I always put it on the heater. It always also works on like 50 degrees. If you put your oven on 50 degrees, some microwaves have a dough-proof setting. It's also not that deep, it is colder, then the dough just needs longer. Yeah, and then I put it aside, and then I always check on my little espresso cup. After around an hour, it should be doubled in size, but sometimes that happens after 45 minutes, sometimes it's 1.5 hours. So really don't stress yourself over the dough. Once it doubled in size, I take it back to my kitchen and I plop it back on my little table. I like to play with the dough a little bit because it's so fluffy. Then I take out my scale, I weigh the dough, divide that by 8 and make 8 little bagel pieces. I like to weigh them just to be sure, just to make equally sized bagels. It's really not on the curriculum here, like do whatever you want. Some people already form them into bagels right now, but what I like to do is like form them into little dough balls again, and just so they can have their satisfying tension again. With my dough box, which is actually just an IKEA box, I grease that out a little bit with olive oil, and then I take my little dough balls and let that proof for another 10 to 20 minutes on my heater, just so they can have tension again, just so can rest a little, just so they can chill out and be dough again. Once that's done and I feel like they look like dough again, I get them out and I poke a little hole in them, and then I stretch them out and I make them bagels. The important thing is you go slowly about like stretching them out to make them bagels. If you go too fast, you're gonna rip off the dough. And now they do look like bagels, which I feel like is very satisfying. Let them sit for another 10-20ish minutes. Next, I'm gonna preheat the oven to 220 at conventional heat while we boil the bagels. This is the largest pot I have and it fits 3 bagels. And then we want to boil the bagels from each side 2 to 3 minutes. That's what makes them so chewy and soft at the same time. But be careful, they will puff up quite a lot. And once they're done boiling, I get out my self-made everything bagel seasoning, which is heavily inspired by Trader Joe's everything but the bagel seasoning, and it's just basically a recipe I found on TikTok, but I don't know who I got it from. I don't know anymore. It was a British girl, but I appreciate her help. In this house, our favorite bagel is the everything bagel, so that's the seasoning I always have on stock, but you can also do just sesame seeds, like whatever floats your boat, like do whatever you want. Optionally, you can also use egg wash on top of your bagels and then put the topping on top if you like the little shine. I think it's low-key unnecessary, but I understand why you do it. I do it if I have I always do it if I have leftover eggs that I need to use. Then I put egg wash on them, but normally I do it without. And I just push it a little on there. But don't push them in too much or you will flatten your whole bagel. I always bake 4 of them at a time on my second to last rack in my oven for 15 to 20 minutes. I check on them after 15, but most of the time they end up baking for 20 minutes. I feel like that's the best balance between chewy, crispy, and soft. If you like them a little bit crispier, leave them in for 5 minutes more. And honestly, there you have bagels. It's not that hard, right? If I can do it, anybody can. And it's also very helpful if you live in a country that doesn't really have bagels, like Germany. Or the ones they have, they suck. So I can just recommend those. This is my go-to recipe. Tell me, what would you like to know from the people in the comments? We would like to know what your favorite cheese. She would also like to make a point that it's a dog's right to collect the cheese tags. Also applicable in this video, it applied to the cream cheese from a bagel. I hope you liked the video and have a great rest of your day. Me and W wish you all the best. Love you. Bye bye.